Helen and this is my fiance, Ben Nitkin.
So we were planning to do this at our house this week, but due to some circumstances beyond our control, we're going to be doing cooking over YouTube instead.
And hopefully we'll do a Zoom class tomorrow to talk about what we're doing with this. So we know that everyone is not doing a lot of grocery shopping, so we are going to pick a lot of Passover recipes that use various different ingredients that you might have around the house. Hopefully it includes a stale box of matzah, but we will see.
We are making machaya rolls, which I've also heard called Passover rolls, or Helen calls them popovers. It's all the same thing. I have all the ingredients set out for half a batch. I'm going to give you the ingredients for a full batch if you want to make that at home. Since we're making a lot today, I'm trying to scale down. So you're going to want a cup of water, 1/3 of a cup of oil, 4 eggs, I have 2 for obvious reasons, and a cup of matzah meal, as well as 1/4 teaspoon of salt. To start with, combine the water and the oil in a small saucepan and bring to a boil. Now that we're at a nice boil, we're going to add the matzah meal and the salt. It might take a little more heat, but bring it back to a boil and mix well until the batter starts coming away from the sides. So you can see it's starting to stick less now. Take it off of the heat. I'm just turning it off here. And add the eggs one at a time. Mix them in really well. For baking, any sort of cupcake liner works. I've got these cool silicone ones that I like because they stand up on their own. There's nothing too special going on here. We're just going to fill them up with the batter we made. I'm putting around 2 tablespoons in each, measuring very, very carefully.
1/2.
And again, this is a half batch, so the full batch will make more, or if you like, they keep really well. You can feel free to double it. Tell if you don't.
You're dripping off the outside of the pan.
Shh. Now that everything's all set, into the oven. These guys bake for 20 minutes at 400 degrees, and then another 25 at 300. When they come out, they usually have a nice little pocket in the center, which is great for sticking jam or cinnamon sugar or whatever you like into. And here are the popovers. So they've been in here for, it was 20 minutes at 400 and another 25 minutes at 350. Sorry, 300. And you can see they've puffed up quite a bit, especially this guy. And if I set that aside, you can tear it open and see that it's nice and light inside. These ones didn't actually get a pocket in the middle, which is unusual. They usually do. Anyway, bon appetit! So this isn't a full-fledged recipe in itself, but one trick I've learned from my mom, if I recall, is that you can replace a lot of flour crusts in quiches or similar dishes with potato, which makes them quesadic. So you're going to start with a couple of potatoes, and as elsewhere, I'm making very small batches because I don't have anyone to share it with, because diseases suck. So we're going to start by grating the potatoes nice and small. Throwing them everywhere. At the end of the day, this is very similar to a latke recipe, so nothing I'm doing here is especially magic. You can feel free to futz the recipe however you want. Obviously, normally you use flour. I'm using matzo meal instead to help bind it a little. Somewhere around a tablespoon for the small amount of potato that I have. And then a little salt, and you can use onions if you want. I have onion powder because I did not feel like cutting up a quarter of an onion. Again, there's nothing sacred about the particular ingredients here. And then when you've got something that looks good, I've got a little frying pan here that I'm going to use. Pour the batter in. It's a bit of a stretch to call it batter, but work with me. And then just make a nice crust around the edge and the bottom. It takes a little coercion to keep it from pulling apart too much. Because unlike a real flour batter, this doesn't roll, it doesn't really have any cohesion. Also, unlike a real pie crust, this does need to cook before you can fill it, or it'll just kind of stay soggy. So throw it in the oven at around 400 for around 15 minutes. All of this is very fast and loose. The goal is to get it to be a little crispy and cooked through. So now we're coming back to the little quiche crust, which this was baking in the same oven as the popovers, so it had about 15 minutes at 400 degrees, and then a while more at 300. But you can see it's crisped up pretty nicely. So we can put whatever we want in here. Egg, spinach, probably not bacon. And then bake it again as you would with a normal quiche. So, again, in the spirit of cooking with what we have, let's fill this tart with an onion and goat cheese blend, just in case we're out of eggs. I'm going to start with a couple teaspoons of olive oil and get that nice and warm, and then we'll saute the onions for a couple minutes to soften them and get a little browning. Oh, crud. I am a professional.
Why did we put in drawers again?
There we are, nicely cooked. I'm gonna add some salt and some pepper. A lot of salt because this grinder is slow.
Salt.
And a pinch of nutmeg, because it goes really well with the goat cheese. And I don't want to stir the goat cheese in too much because it'll break up into little pieces. But we are going to throw that in and combine it. You can see it gets very melty when it gets hot. And into our prepared crust. And I'm going to go roast this for a minute to put some color on. So one of my favorite ingredients for Passover is almond flour, which is this stuff. It's literally just shredded almonds. But it's pesadic and it tastes way better than matzo meal.
Show the bag. Low
Low bar, I realize. I get it from Costco, personally. You can probably find it at organic groceries in the ilk. Like, I bet Sprouts has it. So, because it is Passover, this cake is going to be leavened with egg whites. So we got 7 eggs here. Beyond that, it's a cup of sugar. It's 420 grams of almond flour, which is about 4.5 cups. When possible, you get better accuracy if you can measure it by weight, if you've got a kitchen scale. Also highly recommend. Anyways, half a cup of oil, and then some salt and a little powdered sugar for dressing the top. That does not belong here. This does. And then cardamom for spicing it. So we are going to start by separating the eggs, which, we'll see. I have 7 eggs. We will see how it goes. I know, it's non-stop excitement to watch someone separate eggs. Truly the highlight of any day. One trick I know for separating is to drop the egg yolk between your fingers, with your fingers a little outstretched. It helps separate the white more cleanly, as opposed to just holding it and waiting for the white to drip off your fingers. The other thing I'm doing here is I'm using 3 different bowls. So I've got a bowl for the yolks, I've got a bowl for the whites, and then I've got a third one so that if I do break any of these yolks, which, 2 for 2, if I do break any, I can set it aside and use it for something else without contaminating what I've already separated. So, in the land of the yolks, we're going to mix in a cup of sugar, it calls for a tablespoon of almond extract, and my container's almost empty, so I am going to use the rest of it. And then it calls for 2 teaspoons of cardamom. That smells amazing. which I also don't have. Oh well. No cooking like quarantine cooking. So mix this all up and then we're going to throw the oil in. And finally the almond flour, and then we're going to set this aside for a minute. The recipe cautions that with the almond flour the batter is very heavy, so I'm going to switch from my whisk to a spoon. And you can see it looks an awful lot like a wheat flour batter. It sticks to itself fairly well. It's heavy for this recipe. But it's a lot less alien than cooking with matzo meal. I am going to beat up these egg whites to stiff peaks, and I will be right back. And here we are. I cleaned up a little bit. So we are going to, about a third at a time, work the egg white into this batter. And this batter is very heavy, so I'm spitballing here, but I'm going to try working some gaps into the batter so that the egg white can get in there, rather than just plopping the batter on top of it and hoping for the best. And I'm trying not to break too much of the egg white foam, because that is our non-chemical leavening. So I'm trying to slice gently here through the hard part of the batter, and then fold to incorporate the egg white. And this is probably going to take a minute. So you can see from all that work that this batter is a whole lot lighter right now, and I'm going to add the last bit of egg white. I'm doing a lot of folding here to kind of try and stretch the batter around the whites to incorporate well without actually mixing or pushing the bubbles out. And to wrap this one up, it's going into a 9-inch springform pan, and then into a 350-degree oven for 50 minutes. Get this all out of here. trying to even the top out a little. In we go. Okay, for our next recipe, we're going to be making caramel matzo crunch. You're going to need 4 to 6 matzos. I have 4, and again, with not leaving the house, that's all I'm going to have anytime soon. A cup of butter, a cup of brown sugar, about 3/4 of a cup of chocolate to melt over the top, and then whatever you want for fixings. I pulled out some white chocolate, and I'm going to slice the pecans up nice and small for a little crunch. We're going to start by making caramel. So, take your butter and your brown sugar and set them up to melt in a pan. My butter is still frozen, so I'm going to start with that and get it melted, and then melt the brown sugar into it. Okay, now that the butter is all melted, and you could skip this if your butter wasn't in the freezer, but I am not that clever, go ahead and toss in the brown sugar. And bring it back to a boil. I'm going to turn the heat up a little. The goal here is mostly to get the brown sugar to dissolve. We're not making a true caramel because these are getting baked and that's going to solidify the caramel for us, but we need to make sure that they're well combined and are actually going to turn into a nice caramel in the oven. You can see as I'm stirring that most of the butter is actually getting incorporated, and we're winding up with a nice sauce instead of butter with brown sugar on the bottom of the pan. Okay, that looks good. I'm going to set the caramel aside for a minute so that we can prep the matzos themselves, and I'm leaving it over low heat back there so that it doesn't solidify on me. The recipe suggests using parchment paper. I've got these really cool silicone liners that effectively do the same thing. Non-stick, but it's nice because they're washable and reusable. So we are going to lay out a couple of matzos on each of these sheets, and then give them a nice bath in caramel. So here goes. I'm trying to keep the caramel on the matzos. If it does fall off, the caramel is very goopy, but it's also water soluble. So if you rinse it under hot water for a couple of minutes, it should come off on its own. If you do get it on anything that you didn't want carameled. Yep, there I go off the edge of the matzo. Okay, 4 matzahs that don't look like much, all slathered up in caramel sauce. Okay, and to help the caramel finish setting up, these guys are going to bake at 350 for 15 minutes. We will be back in a bit. So while the matzahs are cooking, I'm going to cut up the pecans and dice the white chocolate a little smaller. This is just going to be a topping on top of the chocolate layer for a little extra crunch. Okay, 15 minutes later. Okay, 15 minutes later, and they're coming back out. Bubble, bubble. I definitely feel like some sort of a witch. So now we're going to take the chocolate and put about 1/4 of it on each one of these and let it melt for a minute. So right now we're just letting the hot caramel melt this chocolate. So that we don't have to do anything too hard. And because I'm curious, let's try covering one of these and see if there's a difference. And we're back a minute later. Let's see if this made a difference. So these are melty-ish. These are also melty-ish. This could be more successful. But you can see I'm just using the spatula to work the chocolate around on the matzahs. Feels like this recipe called for too much caramel and not quite enough chocolate. And right now I'm using long strokes to try and pull the chocolate from where there was too much in the top and the left down towards the bottom and the right where there wasn't enough. And then put a nice swirl into it. And I'm going to wrap this one up with some of the pecan dust. Push that down a little to get it well stuck to the chocolate. So I think that the baking sheet might have made it marginally faster, but it didn't do a whole lot. Because this one's also nicely melted now. And I think because the caramel got to rest an extra minute, I'm not dragging the caramel around as much. This one, I pulled up some of the caramel into the chocolate layer. And on this second one, that's not happening. Here's 2 down. If I was feeling extra fancy, I'd do a drizzle. But I am not feeling that fancy right now. Oh, look at how nice that is. There we go. I'm gonna let these cool for a minute and then take them off of the sheets. And like I was saying, the caramel doesn't stick to the silicones at all. It's really fantastic.